Hi everyone, and welcome to your tutorials for this week's routine. Today we're just going to run through client questions that came through specifically about hip flexors in the warm-up, shoulders in the warm-up, the lunge series, curtsy lunge form, as well as the side plank. How exactly do you twist that knee around to make it work for you? So let's get started. First things first, today we're going to talk about the hip flexors. Now, the hip flexors are sneaky little suckers. They live right in here, and they very easily fire up when we're not recruiting the correct stabilizing muscles surrounding it. So I would say like 98% of the time, when you're feeling a lot of hip flexor, it's because you're not using enough low belly. A really good example of this is if I were standing. If I were to simply lift my knee up and down like this, I'm recruiting all hip flexor to lift my knee. The other way I could do it is to let my knee be soft and then scoop my low belly in. See how that caused my knee to raise? Only in that case, it was because my low belly pulled inward and that picked the knee up as opposed to just lifting my leg straight up. See the difference there? So as we do the warm-up this week and you begin to go backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, if you do not create that scoop through the low belly when you move backwards, you're going to feel it all in those hip flexors. So try doing this with me, okay? I'm seated on the ground, legs are straight out in front of me, my spine is nice and long. I'm going to lean straight back, keeping my spine completely straight, okay? Now holding here, right away, I'm feeling all top side of the legs, quadriceps coming up into the hip flexors. And if you don't have a great lower back, you're gonna start to feel it right back here as well. Now, I want you to watch the change that happens. I'm going to scoop my low belly in like this, and then I'm gonna shake out my legs. It actually helps if you jiggle them. I always kind of tell myself like Jello, let them try to release, drive that weight into the low belly so you're holding here, and that will feel much better. Other options to help you release the hips would be to simply hold this position scooped and then just do the arms like so you don't have to lean forward and back. You could also shorten the lever by bending the knees. So you could bend those knees, keep the low belly scooped in, and then once again, just work your arms here. Another option would be to kind of butterfly the legs, so I'm letting my legs be open, and then you could try doing it in this position. I am tight in my hips in this direction, so this is not ideal for me, but for some people, this will feel like a really good option. In the warm-up, you're asked to come down to your elbows, and there was some talk about feeling a little too much in the shoulder. So the first thing that we have to ensure is that we're not letting our weight sink down into the shoulders. If I do this, I'm going to feel both my shoulders and I'm going to feel my neck, which of course is not very comfortable. So the idea is that we're going to press up and away from the floor. Feel free to adjust those elbows. You're pushing away. There's actually not a lot of weight back there in the elbows. And now watch the other piece that you have to do. I still have to keep that low belly scooped in. So I'm pressing away from the floor with my upper body. I'm pressing down to the floor with my lower body. Now when we take the open and close, you'll notice I have a pretty big range here. I can stretch up and come down in a pretty big manner. I would say most people, unless you're super open through your chest, that's going to be much smaller. And the key that you need to know is that that part is supposed to feel good. So don't worry about moving really big, and instead let it be more like, now I open, now I close. Like you're just trying to shake it out a little bit. And I think that should help you there with the arms. All right, knee pain in the curtsy lunge. Now this is a pretty common question that comes in because it's really easy to get a slight discrepancy in the form of the curtsy lunge that can end up putting unnecessary pressure on the knee. So What I find is the most common is people try to curtsy lunge like this, okay? Now, I want you to notice, this doesn't necessarily look bad, okay? But look at my knee versus the alignment of my ankle. Do you see how far forward that knee is coming? I'm going to end up feeling a lot of pressure in the knee. I'm also going to feel a lot of pressure up here in the quadricep, okay? Now, in order to make the change, I actually want to move this back here. Ooh, that's a big difference, right? Did you see that? Here, I'm in the knee, chest is a little high. This is where I want to go. I'm going to move my back leg backwards. I'm going to slide the knee back. So when I first started learning this, I always thought about the knee being like a slope to the ankle, okay? You don't even want them aligned. You want it back behind the ankle. You can put a little extra weight on the outside of that foot. And once you get back here, I'll tell you where you're gonna feel it. You're gonna feel it like really juicy back in this area, as opposed to feeling it really juicy up here in this area or in the knee. Especially if you have weaker knees or knees that tend to overload, this is a great place to use a chair for stability. I don't want you to be afraid to use props. So if you just tried it and you were like, oh, I can't get back that far, that's a sign that you need a chair to hold on to or even a wall to place your hands on that can help you shift that weight backwards so that you're able to get the knee behind the ankle and feel this exercise exactly where you want it. I want to circle back to what we talked about at the beginning of the video when people tend to lift their leg by only using the hip flexor, because it applies to this series. So when coming out of the curtsy lunge and lifting up, this leg is actually not doing a lot. This is way too much. If you're feeling your hip flexors in the curtsy lunge, it's because of this part right here. So when you stand up, keep your knee lower than your hip so it becomes this, and then back down. Not this. Ouch, that's hips. This is not hips. Your oblique series today is less about ouch, 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 burn in the oblique, and it's actually more about stability. And I'm telling you this because I want you to understand the feeling that you should have. It should be more stable and less like a pinpointed burn, okay? That's what's going on in this series. Now, let's talk about how you transition your leg down to the floor. So the transition turning this way deals with a couple of things. Number one, the foot that's on the floor has to twist. Number two, the pelvis has to twist over. And number three, the shoulders ideally stay squared down to the floor. Now, if you cannot take as big of a rotation here, it has to do with flexibility. This is totally fine. So here's what you need to do. You twist as far as you can, keeping your shoulders down on the floor. So maybe that's like only this far. Then when you turn open, you adjust even more until you get your leg over parallel to the side. So you do not have to land with your leg perfect across the mat, but as you turn open, you want to get your leg perfect across the mat. Once we are in this position, there's so many things that are working, but essentially right here, so this oblique is keeping us from doing this position, okay? So I lift this oblique up and that's protecting my shoulder. This oblique is getting a nice long stretch because that toe is staying close to the floor. And then this outer thigh is working as well when the leg bends and when the leg extends. The other thing that's working very deeply here is through the center of your core. So I'm gonna turn to the side. When you bend the leg, you wanna make sure that you don't arch open. Keep the ribs and the hips tight together, so keep the belly in, and then move the leg, and then you'll come back out of it. So in that series, both obliques are working, the core is working, and the outer thigh.